get to the most important part of the evening. What do you say? The induction of 4 new members in the Iowa Golf Hall of Fame. First, I would like to introduce Barb Stein, the daughter of Frank Whitey Barnard, our first inductee. She will say a few words and introduce her dad's presenter, Craig DeVrieze.
Good evening. I'm so glad to be here. Tonight, before I get started, we're doing 2 parts. I'm doing the little part that talks about one thing my dad did, and Craig DeVrieze is taking over to talk about the main thing. But I'm adding something to my talk. When my grandkids and I were in the hotel room waiting to come, Rigby said to me, "Are you going to tell him that your dad broke his promise and never took you to Disneyland?" And I said, "Oh no, I wouldn't share that with anybody." But as I thought about it a little bit later, I go, this is it. This makes up for it. My dad is looking down and saying, "Oh my gosh, what an honor." So I thank you all for being here, and I thank Chad and the committee for all they've done. Our very small family's here. When I was writing this out, I go, well, I keep saying our dad, but he's not, all of us are, Christopher and I are the children of Patty and Whitey. David and Nicole are the grandchildren, and the great-grandchildren, Rigby and Ian, never met Dad. So what I'm hoping is that when they grow up and drive over to Des Moines, they can come here to the Hall of Fame and see the legacy of their great-great-grandfather, and I think that's just stupendous. So we're going to do the 2 parts with me doing the first part. My dad's entire life was shaped by the game of golf. He grew up in a single-parent family during the Great Depression. They had not a penny to their names, and his mother worked 12-hour shifts to take care of the 3 kids. No help, no cars, nothing. And so his determination was just something else. But also, he was introduced to golf at age 12. And Craig writes about it in one of his books. And it is pretty astounding that someone could live a life with so much passion that he learned at that age. He was a contemporary of Jack Fleck. When they were kids, they were caddies at the Davenport Country Club. And again, I always thought, how did my dad get to the Davenport Country Club? It was 25 minutes from Bettendorf. They had no car, and then Craig illuminated in one of his books about the caddies had their red caps, they stood on the main street, members would drive by and pick them up, and they'd all have a day at the Davenport Country Club. Well, the things that you don't kind of think about with kids like that is they're learning to interact with people, to talk, to have manners. They're making money in a time when it was very important. They learned to play golf in that job. And he is smitten then. That did it for a lifetime, and he never stopped. As a matter of fact, when he was in poor health at the very end of his life, he said, "If I can't play golf, I don't want to live." And he meant it. So there you go. That's passion. He was lucky enough to be able to blend that passion with his career, which was in the travel business. So he was able to go all over the world. He took people, he went at every course you could ever imagine. And so we learned a lot of things about him. He was always optimistic, and I think probably if you had a conversation at your table, you might agree with me that golfers are eternally optimistic. That's why they get up every day, they're going to have a better day, and it never rains on the golf course. So, but he taught us that hard work and perseverance can make a big deal, and a lot of practice and so on. He also learned that he met the most wonderful people, and that was true all over the world. He kept his old friends that he grew up with his whole life and golfed with his whole life. But he also made friends all over the United States and all over Europe. He had one group, they called themselves the Gorillas, and they played at the Rock Island Arsenal every Monday night. And there were 13 of them. Do you think anybody else would put up with that? I mean, that's just astounding. He had another great group of friends that had their own tournament called the Knickers Open. and somebody found an old trophy in a garbage can. So they would wear their knickers, except Johnny Lujack would not wear knickers. He wouldn't even tuck his pants in his socks. So they'd wear their knickers, they'd go out with their caps, they'd have the tournament, and then whoever won got to have that terrible trophy. And then they'd invite families to have dinner afterwards. And that went on for years and years and years. I think that just shows how much fun my dad was. He was great fun, he loved people, he kept friends a long time. So one thing that also went on in his career with travel was that he went to Scotland 27 times. And that was with different people. So he and my mom would take friends, they'd go. At one point, Tom Davis at the university was taking donors and people who loved to golf, and they'd go over, a couple of groups like that. So they played all the old courses, and because he was the travel agent, he also planned everything. And I think they all had a bang-up time, but that's a lot of times to go to Scotland. The event that I wanted to talk about is that also during this time of I graduated in '64, the time that our kids started going to college and moving away, my parents started really looking for a place to have a second home. So what they would do is they would go on a vacation, they'd go to Arizona, they'd go to Florida, they would go to, wherever, all over the country. Never found a place. One place, they did put money down on a house in Portugal once. And they signed some papers and they came home and they were so proud of themselves. And I said, Mom, do you think any of us could get together at the same time? We were all out of the nest by then, So thinking about work schedules and things like that. So they did put a kibosh on that. But anyway, finally they did find their place, and it was in Palm Springs. And the place that they bought had 3 golf courses, and well, my dad was in heaven there. One last thing that I would share is at our house, you had to be at the dinner table at 5 or 5:30, and we had real conversations. A lot of things that were important to my parents and all about our days and all that kind of stuff. And one thing that Dad always said was, you have to give back. You always have to give back. Now at the time, he was park commissioner of Davenport. And he said, we've only got 2 municipal courses here, and that just isn't right. So they worked through how to put a third course, and where to put it and what to do. And I must have been in high school by then. I do remember us getting in the station wagon and going out to the very west of Davenport to see the land that was being prepared for Emi's golf course. And, there wasn't anything going on. I mean, it was that way. So, when I went back to Davenport for my 50th class reunion, the people who attended the golf event, came in that night, and I go, well, where'd you play today? And they said, Emi's. I said, well, how is that course? And they said, it is so fabulous you wouldn't believe it. The trees are mature, the course is a great play. We can say nothing but great things about it. And I know that that's one thing that my dad was very proud of, his legacy of that, of getting that done, and feeling proud that there were now 3 courses that the public could play in. I'm going to introduce Craig. He's going to do the next part, which is really the part my dad had really felt his legacy, his most important accomplishment was what Craig's going to talk about. And Craig has had a long career as a sports writer in the Quad Cities for many different papers and so on. He thankfully wrote a supporting letter for our application that was so kind, and he showed up tonight. I've never met him before, but I have talked to him. So the latest book that he wrote was called Magic Happened, celebrating 50 years of the John Deere Classic. And I read many chapters of both the last 2 books, and it was so wonderful. He's such a wonderful writer. You don't have to be connected to what he's writing about. You get it, it's really fun. So one of his other books was The Davenport Country Club, A Century on the Bluff, and 100-Year History of Short Hills. Now he is a freelance writer, and we are ever grateful that he came tonight. And thank you very much. All right, keep it up, huh?
Well, thank you, Barb, and thank you, esteemed members and guests of the Iowa Golf Association. Congratulations to each of tonight's inductees. It's a privilege to join in this much-deserved celebration of Whitey Franklin Barnard, whose contributions to the game of golf have had a lasting impact in the state of Iowa, and particularly in my native Quad Cities. I spent 30 years as a sports writer for two of my hometown newspapers, the Quad City Times and the Argus Dispatch, and in that role I had the good fortune to report and write about the game of golf and the interesting and generous people who grew the game on the banks of the Mississippi. As Barb noted, I most recently had the great privilege of authoring books about the eventful histories of the John Deere Classic and Davenport Country Club. Franklin Whitey Barnard was a primary player in both of those magnificent stories, and in so many ways he made the game he loved better in his and my hometown. I'd like to illustrate Whitey's passion for golf by sharing a brief passage from each of those books. From Magic Happened, celebrating 50 years of the John Deere Classic, Whitey Barnard was absolutely obsessed with golf, and he was good at it too. Whitey won a lot of amateur events and led a lot of golf tours to Europe and elsewhere, said legendary QC Sports television anchor Tom Cornelis, who once accompanied Barnard on a golf trip to Hawaii. When the young broadcaster went to the hotel lobby in advance of a morning tea time in Honolulu, he found his host bleeding from the head after having fallen into a coffee table. I said, "Whitey, you've got to get to the hospital," Cornelis remembered. He said, "I'll do it afterward." He tied a kerchief around the gash, went out and shot 76 at Waialae Country Club, wiping blood the whole time. Now this from Davenport Country Club, a century on the bluff, published in 2024. Also serving the World War II effort was a DCC caddy turned member named F.L. Barnard. A wartime pilot and a flight instructor at a naval base in Florida, Ensign Barnard, years later, would tell his son Chris stories of harrowing wartime flights in turbulent skies. "In battle?" I asked. "No, to play golf in the States," the son replied with a grin. Whitey's service to his country was as a top stick on the Navy golf squad. The admirals really liked that. They also serve and make birdies. I did not know Whitey personally very well, but I was very aware of his noteworthy contribution to Quad City golf when I took over the golf beat at the Moline Dispatch in 1984. Certainly knew he was an iconic figure in the game locally. I also knew that he had played foundational roles in the creation of Emi's Park Golf Course in Davenport, Crow Valley Country Club in Bettendorf, and especially in creating the Quad Cities Open. The latter, of course, is known worldwide today as the John Deere Classic, a PGA Tour event which has taken place in my hometown for going on 55 years. On one of the few occasions I did interview Whitey prior to his passing in May of 2000, he told me his vision for bringing a pro tournament to his hometown had been sparked while serving as a teenage caddy for Tommy Armour at the 1936 Western Open at DCC. More than half a century later, Whitey told me the enthusiastic community response to having many of the greatest golfers in the world competing in their hometown in the middle of the Great Depression had sparked his passion for bringing those great players back on an annual basis. In 1951, Whitey was a member of the Davenport Country Club in good standing and also a key member of the Quad City 200 Civic Golf Association. In January of that year, he welcomed Western Golf Association icon Chick Evans into his home to finalize plans to bring what was then considered one of pro golf's majors back to the Bluff the following June. After a successful Western Open in 1951, he joined with the QC 200 in making plans to bring a pro golf tournament to Davenport's Credit Island Municipal Golf Course the following year. But Credit Island wasn't quite up to tour standards, and after being rebuffed for a couple of years, the QC 200 group disbanded. But Whitey, more than anyone, clung to the dream he'd fostered while carrying Tommy Armour's bag for a grand total of $20 for 4 days over the summer in 1936. Meanwhile, his commitment to golf in his hometown led him to join the Davenport Park Board and oversee the creation of a third municipal golf course, Emis Park, that opened in 1961. And he also championed the hiring of Bob Fry as the city's head professional. Bob was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1993, and he played the pro golf circuit part-time when he was not working at the Davenport courses. And he proved to be a very valuable ally in creating Crow Valley Country Club, which opened in June of 1969. Other members of the what was called the Crow Creek 34 saw the Bettendorf Club as a real estate development opportunity, and most importantly, as a chance to launch a modern golf course that didn't require tee times. But Barnard and Fry had a larger vision. That became a reality when the Quad Cities Open teed off at Crow in the fall of 1971. Whitey served as co-chair of that and 3 subsequent QCOs held at the Bettendorf course. He invested a considerable sum of his own money to keep the event on the tee through 1974. Those Crow QCOs, they struggled financially, and efforts to recreate the QC 200 struggled too. So in the spring of 1975, it looked like that was it. There was a news conference called, there was a press release prepared. It was actually passed out to the assembled media at a television studio in Moline, but then it was rescinded when Whitey agreed to the entreaties of a couple of JCs, Quad City wide organization JC members, to delay the announcement and let them give it a shot to try to save the thing. He accepted a buyout of his interest, and he proudly watched the 1975 tournament come together that July at a new course, Oakwood Country Club in Oak Coal Valley, where Roger Maltby's final round rally from 7 shots back was overshadowed by Ed McMahon's announcement that same day that he would host the event the following year and bring with him many of his show business pals to add some pizzazz. That 1975 moment amounted to one of the 5 existential threats that the tournament survived, but survive it did. And the first John Deere Classic took place at Oakwood in 1999, and TPC Deere Run, the tournament's tour-managed host in Silvis, Illinois, was less than a month away from opening when Whitey died in 2000. That means that Whitey knew that his vision that began in 1936 would survive and thrive. It has. This past July, the John Deere Classic celebrated an amazing milestone with its Birdies for Charity program surpassing $200 million raised for hometown charities. The tournament has claimed the rank of per capita leader on tour in charity dollars raised, and it's undisputed over the past 25 years. We've had champions like Payne Stewart, Steve Stricker, Jordan Spieth, Bryson DeChambeau winning the Quad Cities Mint. I left out some guy named Zach Johnson. I think he has had some success at the tournament. That's an incredibly significant impact of an event Whitey dreamt of as a teenager, and an indelible legacy for his foundational work to bring this tournament to life. As a golfer, Whitey won numerous club championships both at Crow Valley and DCC. He was a multi-time winner of the Quad City Amateur Tournament. He also competed in and won amateur events across the globe and played alongside many of the game's greatest players. Whitey still was swinging a golf club in 1999, months after undergoing a kidney transplant and months before his passing. This was an Iowan who lived and loved the game of golf. Please join me in welcoming this true champion of golf to his rightful place in the Iowa Golf Hall of Fame.